Much of Australia is turning into a buyer's market.
Folks, there's a little bit of gap between our written instructions today and where our current highest bid sits.
At auctions, properties aren't meeting the reserve
At $2,300,000.
and agents are having to work harder to close the deal.
Third and final time, and it goes now, it goes, and it is sold. Congratulations all four.
Nationally, the property market is teetering on the edge of a downturn.
Prices are slowing. In some cities, they're falling.
It's more difficult now than it was 3 months ago.
More properties are on the market and they're taking longer to sell.
The market is a little bit like a tyre with a slow leak. It's gradually deflating.
The rising cost of living and higher mortgage repayments have forced some to sell up.
It's a massive relief. Literally from 4 hours sleep a night, wringing my hands and worrying about the future and about the present, to waking up refreshed.
A lot of people exiting being sellers and becoming renters and waiting until interest rates come down.
While others have turned the dream of home ownership into a reality.
Feels surreal, to be honest. Been looking in the market for probably last year.
As prices in some cities outperform the national picture.
The Perth market is on fire at the moment.
And rents are still rising, but the boom may be over.
Those really big jumps in pricing don't seem to be occurring as much as we were seeing in 2023 and at the start of 24.
It's still tough though to find a home.
The price isn't quite matching that standard.
People are struggling to get into the rental market. They're now looking to buy.
As affordability bites,
2025 could very easily be the year of the unit.
we ask the experts where the market is going in the next 12 months. Prices in Australia's strongest markets are losing momentum. In the nation's fourth most expensive city, buyers are cautious.
So please, if it's within your range, you've got to put your paddle up.
Sitting on the sidelines before some jump in.
Third call, last call, bid of 16 has it. We sell, selling, and sold to you. Congratulations, sir. Very well done.
This property in Adelaide sells for just over $1.3 million. The real estate agents here are positive about the next 12 months.
I do believe that we will still have that incremental growth month by month, but we may start to see a little bit more of a balanced market as well.
On the West Coast, property prices rose more than 20% in 2024, the biggest gains nationally.
2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment.
There are many reasons why values here have surged.
Ensuite and a bathroom there. Just a complete undersupply of property and apartments. I think during the downturn they didn't build enough property, and now we've had a surge in population, a really strong job market.
It's those factors that property experts say will keep prices elevated in 2025.
Our forecast is for Perth housing prices to rise between 14 to 19%. So a very strong market. Looking at all the leading indicators we have on the Perth market right now, it's all suggesting it's a deep seller's market at this stage with plenty of eager buyers out there.
In Brisbane, sellers are already trying to cash in.
We're seeing a bit of movement from sellers who have been investors or long-term holders, taking advantage of really great prices at the moment.
Looking across the country, prices are up 5.5% over the year, with the biggest gains seen in Perth, Adelaide and Brisbane, followed by the regions Sydney and Darwin, while Canberra, Hobart and Melbourne saw falls. Sydney remains the most expensive capital city with a median home value of nearly $1.2 million. Brisbane is next, followed by Canberra, Adelaide, Perth, Melbourne, Hobart, the regions and Darwin.
In 2024, it was a broad slowdown after a very resilient run of price growth. We saw monthly pace of gains go from about 0.8% in the March quarter to just 0.1% by November, and buyers gradually dropping off under the constraint of high cost of living, high interest rates and lack of affordability.
And in terms of the broader housing market, what is your expectation for 2025?
I would say for values, you could see a bit of a year of two halves. The way the rate of growth is going at the moment in property values, it wouldn't be a surprise to see a little bit of a cyclical decline in the start of the year. That could be offset by a reduction in the cash rate.
Connor Roche West managed to buy his first home in 2024.
Absolutely chuffed, obviously first place. So extremely excited, been looking for absolutely ages it feels like.
The 25-year-old received help from his parents.
Without it, it's damn near impossible.
Getting on the property ladder any way possible. In Sydney, house prices have been falling since October.
The way it's been put together, 4 bedrooms.
It's becoming a challenging market for auctioneers and real estate agents.
It's not moving forward, there is a slight shift downwards.
At this auction in Sydney's Inner West, there were many negotiations before the vendors dropped the reserve price to sell their home. It's something auctioneer Clarence White is seeing a lot of.
Buyers are very price cautious at the moment. They're very tentative. A lot of people are thinking, do I buy now? Do I wait until the interest rates come down? And that's causing people to be very tentative with their action on auction day. So you end up with an auction like we just had.
Where you have to work a bit harder.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are you seeing the competition among the bidders?
You tend to get competition up to a certain point, and this is why I say it's price cautious, because you will get some bidding, but you'll get some bidding up to a cautious level. I would say on about 80% of properties at the moment, we are then having to negotiate with the highest bidder and with the vendor in order to bring the thing together to be sold on auction day.
What are clearance rates doing in the area that you operate?
So look, we always study Sydney-wide clearance rates. Preliminaries are coming in at mid-60s, but the real clearance rate, once you extrapolate all out the data, is mid-50s. Yeah, mid to high 50s is your actual clearance rate across Sydney. That's being echoed in the areas that we work with. So it is a moderately balanced or delicately balanced market at the moment. It is a little bit tricky. We're having to work on both sides of the equation to get most properties sold.
Clarence says many properties are being sold before auction.
So there is an increased incidence of sell priors at the moment, and sell priors can happen in 2 instances. It can be either that the offer was so hot that the owner had to take it, or it can be that we're ending up working with just one buyer and there's really a need to sell that property prior. So I'd suggest to you at the moment, a lot of properties are being sold prior because they're not necessarily having the legs to take it to auction. Buyers who are tentative in the current market have the opportunity to buy quite well at this point, whereas once the interest rates do start to move, inevitably people will become more confident and prices will probably go up. So there's actually a great opportunity for buyers to take action right now. They just need to act confidently and put their best foot forward.
And he has some advice for sellers.
I always say to a vendor, have your dream price in mind, put that on the reserve, but then you need to work backwards and ask yourself the question, okay, if it was $50,000 less than that, would I sell it at that level if we couldn't get any more? And then if it was $50,000 less again, would I sell at that level? So that way you've got a mental framework for decision making and you're not caught in the eye of the storm on auction day, because very often we're not meeting reserves at the moment and they're having to be adjusted in order to get properties sold.
Real estate agent Marco Ericello also has a few tips.
Congratulations. Yeah, congratulations. Property has to be well presented, it has to be well marketed, and it has to be priced correctly. If those elements happen, then the property will sell. Buyers do prefer turnkey properties. There is a lot of media coverage about the cost of building materials and labour, so houses that are complete have an advantage.
Oh wow. It's a really cool house, isn't it? They've got the original ceilings and yeah, I love the decor. Really cool. Very much in keeping with the area as well. I think it will appeal to a lot of people. Oh wow, look at the backyard.
Oh my gosh, so what's that, like a studio? Luxury, isn't it?
Oh. You're seeing families move very far out of the city to suburbs that traditionally wouldn't have been looked at.
Absolutely. Just anecdotally though, I think the data on the demographics is pretty lagged.
Right.
But what we see in the data is that the fastest growing areas of Sydney are the pockets where houses can still be found for just under $1 million in Sydney. So St Mary's, you've got a median dwelling value of about $990,000, up 12% over the past year.
And that's at a time when Sydney property values are coming down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the whole of the city value has come down, but areas like in the outer southwest, outer west, they're growing, and they're growing quickly.
Is it population growth though, as opposed to people moving from a different area to there?
A lot of the internal migration that we're getting at the moment is short-term students. I think it's a demographic shift of people from renting in the inner city to buying the family home. That big generation of millennials are buying family homes, and that's something that's shifting the market.
It's pretty crazy when you're like, a bargain is under $1 million, right?
No, that's Sydney.
Yeah. Now I'm here with Eliza Owen, Head of Research at CoreLogic. She's just going to join me now to talk about the outlook for property prices. So Eliza, it's been a mixed bag in terms of price movements around the country in 2024. What do you think is going to happen in 2025? Are we going to see that two-speed market continue?
I think that growth rates will probably start to converge a bit in 2025 because we might expect a bit of a recovery or a stabilising in the markets that moved lower, and for markets like Perth, Brisbane and Adelaide that were showing really high growth rates, that might actually start to ease. In fact, it's already easing as we head into the end of the year. Overall, national home values are looking like they're going to finish out 2024 up about 5%. I would imagine the national growth rate for 2025 would be around the same, maybe a little bit lower.
Over the COVID period and just post it, we saw very big gains in home prices. Are sellers going to have to readjust their expectations when they're putting their properties on the market now?
Absolutely. In spring of 2024, we basically saw more listings coming to the market for sale than there were transactions that happened. We're seeing lower auction clearance rates, properties are taking longer to sell, and sellers are already having to adjust their price expectations if they want to get a deal done, especially in the more expensive markets where buyers are dropping out.
And in spite of that, are you surprised with how resilient the housing market has been, given the 13 rate rises and the fact that rates have held at this 4.35% for over 12 months now?
The housing market's been incredibly resilient. It actually hit a fresh record high back in November of 2023 when we saw the last interest rate increase, and it's been on a 22-month stretch of increase in values. And I think key to that has been more well-capitalised buyers participating in the market who aren't as affected by rate rises, people who already own a home that has gained a lot of value and using that towards the purchase of the next home. The thing is, that buyer pool can't be playing out forever. It becomes exhausted at some point, and I think that's why we're really seeing the slowdown in home values now, where they were up just 0.1% in November.
What will an interest rate cut do to the property market? Is it going to put a fire under it, or is it just going to keep things where they are?
Yeah, so traditionally, or looking back at the history of the data, when interest rates move lower, borrowing capacity increases, and so you get not only a rise in values, but more transaction activity, more sales and listings. It's uncertain whether certainly this first cash rate reduction sometime in 2025 is going to do that much for the market. We've already seen increased borrowing capacity from the stage 3 tax cuts, and it didn't do much for the market at all. If anything, growth rates continued to slow. So I think we've just got to keep that in mind, that there could be a lackluster response to the first rate cut, and even the full rate cutting cycle won't bring us back to the rates we were at during COVID or pre-COVID.
Do you think borrowers have already factored in the potential for rate cuts when making their purchasing decisions?
Borrowers may have already factored in the potential for rate cuts when making a purchase decision through 2024, especially if they could afford to take on a higher interest rate in the short term and look forward to discounts later on. Those rate relief discounts haven't happened yet, and that could also be contributing to slower buyer demand right now.
Are we seeing vendors being forced to sell homes they wouldn't otherwise because of high rates?
I think there are some indicators of stress in very particular markets, outer fringe suburbs of the cities, for example. But overall, households have coped remarkably well with higher interest rates. The mortgage arrears rate, where the mortgage payments are coming in 90 days late or more, is sitting at about 1% of outstanding home loans. And while it's massive stress for the households that are going through it, I think it's fair to say that most homeowners are empowered to keep their properties off the market if the selling conditions aren't right. And for that reason, I think we'll see new listings actually move a little bit lower compared to what you'd usually see for the first quarter of 2025.
On the supply side, we know it's an issue. The government has a target of 1.2 million homes over the next 5 years. Are we on track for that, and is it doing enough?
We're not really on track to meet that 1.2 million home target because private sector conditions are just not there to deliver the new housing. You've got high interest rates, slowing housing costs, so that thins the profit margin, higher holding costs, higher construction costs. So at the moment, we can't rely on the private sector alone to be delivering that housing stock. The government needs to do more in terms of social and affordable housing. They've brought in Help to Buy with bigger incentives for new homes, which is great. And there are a few projects happening across the states and territories to boost that social and affordable housing supply.
But of course, demand's not going away. We have pretty strong migration in Australia. Do Australians need to get used to the idea of units versus houses?
I think we're already seeing more demand being deferred to the unit sector just because it's so much cheaper. Not necessarily affordable in itself, but a lot cheaper than a detached house. In Sydney, the difference between the median house and unit value is over $600,000. And nationally, we saw an increase of 0.8% in unit values through spring compared to 0.4% in houses. So 2025 could very easily be the year of the unit, where that's simply what more people can afford to buy.
Eliza, thank you.
Thank you.
If you're looking to rent, it's still tough to secure a home. Properties are in hot demand in most cities, but there is some good news. Prices are rising at their slowest pace in more than 3 years. To find out more, I'm off to meet the boss of real estate agent BresicWhitney, Thomas McGlynn. Hey Thomas.
Hello, how are you?
Nice to see you. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, let's go and take a look.
Well, this is a nice space. Yeah.
We come through into the kitchen and yeah, always good to have a skylight that opens up and gives a lot of natural light into the home.
Thomas, how's the rental market performed in your area over 2024?
It's been fairly steady. There's been a lot of ups and downs in the rental market over COVID and then post-COVID, but 2024 has been really, really steady.
Are landlords able to put up rents at the moment?
Landlords can increase rental prices, however, they've only got certain periods of time that they're able to do that. So there are certain periods where they can increase the rent or decrease the rent depending on what the tenant wants to do. But certainly it has to be within the timeframes that they're allotted.
So what kind of demand are you seeing? What properties are most in demand at the moment?
Well, the property that we're in at the moment, this is one of the ones that has been showing great demand all year. It's something that appeals to young families but also professional couples. And we're also seeing some really strong demand in the luxury end of the market. And I think that has a lot to do with people selling this year and then renting before they then buy again. And that's definitely been a big trend that we've seen. And then as always, the entry level of the market, which is sub $1,000 a week in the Sydney metropolitan area is always popular.
Are you seeing lots of competition among tenants for properties?
I think vacancy rates have been really low all year and have remained sub 2%. That shows that there is a little bit of a supply issue with regards to available properties. So there's always going to be a little bit of competition to secure properties such as this. However, I would say that over the course of the past month, we've started to see, tenants having a little bit of a easier time being able to get access to properties and secure a property for themselves.
What's your advice for prospective tenants if they want to secure a property?
The biggest thing that I always say to people looking to get into a rental property is be prepared before you go out. And time is everything. If you wait too long, you might miss out, but if you're really prepared with all of your information, everything that makes it easier for your property manager and the prospective landlord to approve you, that is the biggest thing that you can do.
And on the flip side, what would you say to landlords who want to get a good price and rent out their property quickly?
Well, the biggest thing is always making sure that the property is well presented, but also that it's been maintained in a great way, that they're things that are working, that it's appealing to people. And I think that that's a really important thing for landlords to consider. If they're able to do that, we know that generally they're going to get great tenants that they'd love to have in their property long term.
What's your outlook for the rental market in 2025?
Well, it's going to be interesting. I think we're probably going to see something similar to what we've seen in 2024. 2025, I don't think we're going to see rapidly rising rents. However, I still think that there's going to be, a lot of demand for rental properties, just simply because we are in the midst of a housing crisis and availability of properties is not where we'd like it to be. But I do think it's going to be more of a balanced market between landlords getting a fair price and tenants paying a fair price.
So we're not going to see those huge run-ups in rents that we've seen in previous years, but it's certainly not going to ease off anytime soon. Is that the...
I'd say that that's a fair assumption. Yeah, we're not going to see those rapidly rising rents. And hopefully there's more availability for property as we're starting to see investors trickle back into the market. And that's something that we really do need to see, is people looking to buy again, to be able to have a property for tenants to live in.
And I will ask you a question about investors. What are you seeing in that space?
Well, there hasn't been a huge amount of investors buying. In fact, the trend has been that mum and dad investors that might own one investment property have been selling those investment properties over the course of the past 12 months. And that isn't a good thing. And one thing that we really encourage the government to do is to bring legislation in that actually helps good landlords, but also helps good tenants and encourages investments back into the market.
Thomas McGlynn, so good to speak to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This two-bedroom townhouse in Sydney's eastern suburbs will rent out for $1,200 to $1,400 a week. Prices across the city fell in the 6 months to November, but renters say securing a home still comes with challenges.
There's been a few people at the inspections, a lot of young families looking, so yeah, you never know who you're competing against.
In Melbourne, rents have stabilised, but there are fewer homes on the market here compared to the national average.
The highest demand is in the 1 and 2 bedroom apartment or the property under $1,000 per week.
Across the country, rents are up 5.3% over the year, with prices rising the most in Perth, Adelaide, the regions and Hobart. Just 1.8% of properties are available to rent nationally, and Sydney is the most expensive city to live in, followed by Perth, Canberra and Brisbane.
Rental costs are going to remain high, vacancy rates are going to remain low, but at least the pace of increase in rent costs is going to slow right down.
So what about the next 12 months?
I would expect that growth to continue slowing in 2025 just because the demand side is softening. People can't afford to keep shoveling out more and more for rentals. There's probably a bit more share housing going on so people can scale and reduce their rental cost. And net overseas migration is normalising, so that's going to flow through to slowed rental demand as well.
To get a deeper look at Australia's rental market, I met up with Ray White's chief economist, Nerida Conisbee. Nerida, how has the rental market nationally performed in 2024?
In 2024, we did see quite a slowdown across the country. It wasn't everywhere. Places like Perth are still moving very, very quickly, a lot to do with very high levels of population growth. But in the rest of the country, we did see conditions improve somewhat, primarily because population growth slowed a bit, but also we found that household size started to increase again, so people moving back in together.
So that share house trend really taking off?
Not necessarily share houses, obviously that makes a difference, but even people moving back home, or not leaving home as young. So I think one of the challenges we've had with the rental market is that people often focus on migration and look at the impacts there, but it has a lot also to do with the fact that during the pandemic we didn't really want to live together that much and people really spread out, and as a result it also created greater pressure on the market.
So what are we seeing in vacancy rates? A mixed picture across the country?
It is pretty mixed. I mean, overall we are seeing them starting to rise a little bit, but some markets are continuing to see quite a lot of pressure. So places like southeast Queensland, pretty much the area moving from Byron Bay up to Gold Coast, up to Sunshine Coast, including Brisbane, still very, very strong in terms of demand. Also Western Australia and not just Perth, but also regional areas of WA are still seeing very, very high levels of demand from renters and a shortage of properties available.
So do you think it's going to be cheaper to rent in 2025?
It's unlikely to be cheaper to rent in 2025. Overall, we're seeing rents starting to stabilise but not come back. Some areas, though, we are seeing things improve somewhat. So areas that we've got very high levels of apartment supply, for example, You can get some better deals in those locations, but if you're looking for the standard house, 3-4 bedroom, still very expensive, but those really big jumps in pricing don't seem to be occurring as much as we were seeing in 2023 and at the start of 24.
You mentioned it, but when it comes to migration, how are we seeing that play out in the inner city areas of Australia?
It is starting to slow down. The issue with migration is that you can't obviously stop it at once. You know, you do need to put in policies in place to try and slow it down. The problem, though, we have with migration, with housing, is that we do need more skilled migrants to build houses. That does create pressure on housing demand, but we need that skilled migration to build the houses. So there is a bit of a circular problem at the moment that until we start to see particularly skilled migration in construction start to increase at a level that starts to stabilise construction costs, we are looking at a shortage of rental properties long term.
And what is happening on the supply side? We know we have a shortage of properties across the board. What's happening in the rental space?
There's a lot the government's doing. I mean, it's quite interesting if you have a look at prior to the pandemic, there wasn't much focus on renters' rights and also rental supply. We did rely a lot on mum and dad investors historically, or we have relied a lot on mum and dad investors historically, and obviously we can't just rely on them all the time. We do need to look at alternative measures. Build to rent is a growth area. We're seeing a lot of institutional interest. There has been some tax incentives put in place, particularly on foreign investment into build to rent. It will remain a small part of the market. I mean, if we have a look overseas in the US, it is a very large part, but we are coming from a very low base here. So it's, you know, well under 5% of total rental stock. We've also got a lot of government focus on affordable properties, and I think this is the thing with housing. You know, we do want affordable housing for everyone, but fundamentally the government does need to look after our most vulnerable and make sure that there are enough homes available.
We touched on prices, but can you give us a bit of an outlook for the rental market in 2025?
Places like Perth are still growing very, very quickly. So if we have a look at average rents in that city, in Perth in particular, they have doubled over the last couple of years. So that market is still moving very, very fast. If we have a look at markets like Melbourne and Sydney, we're not seeing the same increases. So I don't see them coming back. You know, I think for renters, that's obviously not great news, but overall, we're not seeing those really, really sharp increases that we saw during the pandemic and immediately after.
Nerida Conisbee, great to talk to you. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
And that's all from this summer housing special. For more on our stories, you can head to the ABC website or catch up at any time on ABC iView. The Business will return on Monday, the 27th of January at 8:45 on the ABC News channel or after the late news on ABC TV. I'm Alicia Barry. Thanks so much for joining me.